It was widely known that one of Fischer's favorite pieces, or maybe his favorite piece, was the King's Bishop, meaning the right squared bishop with white. There is little wonder that for almost all his life he played the Sozin attack against all kinds of Sicilians, placing his bishop on c4 and then on b3, and trying to make the best out of the diagonal a2 g8 by playing f4, f5, weakening the e6 and d5 square. But okay, during the 1972 match, he had some unpleasant surprise in the fourth game. He got outplayed in the opening preparation, and he was lucky to save a draw. And actually, even before there was, we could notice in the previous game against Philip, we could notice that Fischer enjoyed quite a lot having the bishop on g2 too. So actually, after getting that unpleasant surprise in the Sozin, Fischer immediately switched to c4, a move he rarely played before, only on 2 occasions, I think. So changing completely the scenario. And of course, when one plays c4, there is a high probability that the bishop would land on g3 if play does not transpose some other openings, as it happened in other games of the match. So this is the 8th game of the match. Fischer had recovered fantastically well after the 2 losses in the first 2 rounds, one of them by forfeit. Now he was leading already, but this game came as a surprisingly easy win. Actually, after move 15, Spassky gave up an exchange, and he could also resign as well. And this was one of the games which gave reason for speculations such as, Spassky was in very poor form. He did not perform to his best. And it was partly true. But I believe that this game, this typical English game with the bishop on g2, will prove that Fischer knew how to adapt his strategy against Spassky, how to play somehow against his own style. Because the moment when Spassky makes the decisive mistake, he had been outplayed completely. He had no counterplay at all. He had learned some plans in his opening preparation, and those plans could not be carried out. So then he was not flexible enough to readapt himself and defend a worse position. So c4, c5, knight c3, knight c6. In the fourth game, Spassky had transposed to the Tartakova gambit, Queen's gambit, and he lost. That was also a good game by Fischer. And now he chooses an opening which was a specialty of his second in Reykjavik, his main second, Yefim Geller. I believe that this game speaks a little bit about Fischer's approach to his fight, opening strategic, psychological fight in this match. He knew that he was basically alone on technical ground. He had no real help, per se. I mean, of the same caliber as Bondarevsky. He had helped Spassky before the match, and Geller, and also Krogius. He could not afford such a strong team, and plus many grandmasters would eventually help Spassky by correspondence. So he knew that he has to play the games and the match against Spassky. And of course, when he saw this variation, of course he knew that Geller was a specialist of it with black, and he also could not forget the fact that Geller was one of the very few players, I don't remember now, maybe the only one who had a positive score against him. Okay, Spassky was the second one by this moment, still lifetime record. So Fischer had lost several games to Geller. He also won one, the last one, but he knew that it's not a good idea to embark direct opening discussions with Geller. He was too deep in this area of the game, the opening and planning, and And well, the main variation to understand the point, the main variation here goes queen d3 because it's obvious that black threatens bishop e6 followed by knight d5. So white does not really have the time to take on b7 because then his pawns will be spoiled. And so queen d3 is the main move here. And then Geller's favorite line goes something like this. And then black carries out b5 with certain counterplay. Okay, this is the draft idea of black's play. Probably Geller had analyzed it deeper than that, and he showed one or two things to Spassky. Actually, there is a famous game which Geller won by sacrificing an exchange. He played b5 and sacrificed the b8 rook and got a very strong pawn on b2. And probably Spassky was aware of all this. But then, over the board, he got this surprise, bishop g5. Quite an unexpected move. I believe it had never been played before, and anyway, it was not played in important games. Bishop g5. It leaves the queen on d4 yet. And the main purpose of this move is avoiding to play e4, because after queen d3, bishop f5 always more or less forces this e4. Fischer also played this kind of structure against the Marazzi bind with black, but it usually was from the Sicilian move order. I mean, from the Sicilian variation with pawns on e4 and c4, and he knew that black has a certain counterplay with a6 and b5. So he didn't want to have this structure with white. He wanted his bishop to have a long diagonal at its disposal. So bishop g5. After this move, the main point is that he can simply retreat with the queen to d2 if necessary, and then place his rooks on d1 and c1 and enjoy his space advantage. Well, there is this question, but I believe that after this is not really Spassky's style to delay so much the development. Queen d2 or maybe to e3, and then the rooks would go to the center, and there would be a threat of c5. The h6 pawn is hanging, so black has to waste tempo to defend it. So this position may become a little bit unpleasant. Black is underdeveloped, and to play with Fischer these kind of things, there is some drawish tendency, but white keeps always an initiative, and Fischer was very dangerous in these positions. So Spassky played bishop e6, which looks quite natural. Now queen d2 is not possible because c4 is hanging, but the queen has to leave from here because knight d5 is a threat. So Fischer played queen f4. We have seen this move queen d4 to f4 in a fianchetto system in the previous game. It has different purposes here, but it also speaks about the fact that for Fischer, strategic play and planning was tightly connected with some concrete nuances. Somehow, it is interesting from here, there is some pressure along these diagonals. It is not very clear yet what it serves for, but in some later lines we'll see. And also, black cannot free himself now with h6. There is pressure also on this diagonal. And Spassky somehow understood that things are not so simple now. The problem is, for instance, if he plays in the spirit of Geller's variation, okay, there could follow something like this, knight b5. Now with the bishop on g5, the threat of exchange on f6 is very strong. It would spoil black structure. So then, now bishop takes d5, c takes d5 would leave black with a very important weakness. This is almost lost for him. With the pawn on b7, it would maybe offer chances to defend, but with this pawn, this weak square, he's as good as lost. And if he plays like this, then now we can see that the pressure against e7 is quite important. For instance, White now starts playing, there was a threat now of f6 here, so queen d2 is necessary, but the problem is that White is very quickly in occupying the c file, and everything because of the fact that there was this pressure on e7, and Black could not get his pieces in time for neutralizing the pressure. So Spassky probably saw some of these things, and he played queen a5 after 63 minutes of thought. It was obvious that somehow Fischer's strategy was completely surprising to him, and he didn't know what to do. Somehow he had to invent something. And what was worse for Spassky probably was this is actually not his kind of position. Geller knew it very well. Geller would have come up with something effective probably. But this was not really Spassky's. Black's position looks nice. This shape of the structure is nice, and the bishops look great. But if you look better, she only has this plan, a6 and b5, and this means a lack of flexibility. If this doesn't work, then Black is just passive and doomed to endless defense. So okay, actually it is this the position that Spassky played queen a5. Sorry, this we have to repair here. Okay, queen a5, rook a c1. Rook a b8. For instance, there is a nice tactical nuance after rook f c8. Now bishop takes b7, rook takes e4. Even this offers White two rooks for the queen, but even stronger is c5. c5, because now rook takes e5 loses to b4. And if d takes e5, then bishop takes b7 wins the exchange just outright. So this means that Black has to play something like this. But now, once again, we see how well placed the queen and bishops are. Now the pressure on the diagonals I was speaking about is very obvious. White is much better, probably winning. b3, rook f c8. And now, speaking about strategy, strategy means also the ability of planning ahead of the opponent's intentions. Now Black is finally ready to play a6 and b5. He just needs one move to make b5 unstoppable, because a4 is not what White would like to do, because it creates weaknesses on the queen side. And then Fischer's decision is absolutely fantastic. He understood that his queen and bishop had fulfilled their jobs on these diagonals. He had avoided the initial form of counterattack, and now there was this queen, this black queen, which was somewhat differently placed than in the normal lines. And then the move queen d2, abstractly speaking, White simply moves the mechanism, queen and bishop, along the same diagonal, but the main intention is to put pressure on other two diagonals, similarly to those they controlled before. And of course, this diagonal, this diagonal is always under control. With the queen on d2 and queen on f5, there are always tricks with knight d5 and then some intermediate checks somewhere. Not really working now, but one has to count with them. Actually, the trick happened in the game, eventually. So a6 followed, and now bishop e3. Bishop e3, and this is the moment where Spassky, he had thought for so long earlier. He probably had less than 1 hour left by now, and it was only move 15. He was tired, and he was probably also irritated that this was not his position. And he played b5, which simply loses the exchange. It loses the exchange for two reasons. One of them is because this bishop does not have a pawn on e4. The diagonal is available. And the second one because the other bishop came back in time to e3 from g5, where it had done a wonderful job, but now the circumstances had changed. So many other moves have been recommended, and actually many annotators claim that the position was equal. For instance, bishop d7 is a nice try. If the bishop gets to c6, then b5 is coming. But again, the known c5 is very strong, and black will get a weakness on d6 after c takes d6 because this drops an exchange without any serious compensation. Also rook c7 was a recommendation, but it is strange. This is one of the positions where black has reached a maximum of activity, and almost any move would just worsen his position. And rook c7 has the abstract drawback, which with concrete consequences, that the rooks are not connected anymore. The c7 rook is hanging in some lines. And then the simple knight d5 is strong. Usually, if black can defend the c file, knight takes d5 would equalize. But here he has no time to play bishop d7. He has to give up the file, and then this position is simply over for black. He probably loses a pawn, but he's very passive anyway. And if bishop takes d5, then okay, this is an ending which is quite unpleasant for black. It is known from the Maroczy lines. This ending with the bishop's pair against knight and bishop is quite promising for white, because the bishop could, after the rook exchange, the bishop could get there. And then, okay, white could also start a massive pawn attack on the king side. So black is kind of under pressure on both wings. Well, of course, before bishop h3, bishop c8, e4 needs to be played somehow, e4 with f3, but the plans can be combined on both wings. So Spassky played b5. He understood that there was no simple way out, and probably he was also inspired by Geller's game, in which the exchange sacrifice worked perfectly well. But this is not the case here. It's not the case here because white is very well centralized, and actually rook fd1 completes the development. And well, now terrible blunders followed, but it didn't affect the final result, I believe, because the annotator said that black should have acceptable compensation after a move like queen h5. But I don't see the point. I mean, white is an exchange up, and he has a normal position, and many moves have been analyzed here with some counterplay for black, but I wonder what would happen after e3. It's removed the pawn from the attack square, and the problem is that white threatens to play knight d5. So after that, there are simplifications. Queens will be off board, and black will probably lose the a pawn, and white would just win a technical game without effort. Of course, this does not mean that Spassky can be proud of his move, knight d7, but it is somehow very instructive. After the opening, he had managed to paralyze black's counterplay, and black made the first move, b5, active move, which allowed an attack along the e3, a7 diagonal, and now he makes another apparently active move, activating the knight, which allows a blow using this other diagonal. So the tandem queen and bishop, they both delivered their deadly blows. The problem is that I believe that Spassky overlooked that in this position his c4 bishop is hanging, because normally if there is no rook on f8, this intermediate check does not work. But okay, this is already as I said, it did not affect the result in any case. So okay, Spassky managed to reach move 40, but then he had no other chance than resign. So it seems that it was the result of two blunders, but I believe that our closer look to the game reveals that it was somehow Fischer's very subtle strategy that won the game, not Spassky that lost it.